Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Tomcat from Strange Brew Podcast. First, check out our new show. It happened May the 4th. It's on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Watch the Forbidden documentary, A Cult, Louisiana, on Tubi. If you would like to help with the donation for our fundraiser, we have links in the description. That's for our upcoming film, Doors of Perception. You can also visit supportfkn.com. Get yourself a Rockfin Premium membership at rockfin.com/FKN+. And finally, booking guests for August. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show Tomcat. He is host of Strange Brew Podcast, which is a podcast not for the faint of heart or easily offended. Strange Brew is a dark comedy, true crime, paranormal, conspiracy, and anything strange podcast from the Great White North and united with the States. If you love anything bizarre and unusual, from aliens to serial killers, you'll feel right at home with Strange Brew's hosts. Join them on strange journeys as they drink and discuss the creepy and weird sides of life. Tomcat, welcome. How you doing?
What's going on, man? Doing pretty good. Thank you for having me back.
Yes, it's been a while. Been way too long. I've been
Definitely
looking
has.
forward to talking with you again, and you've been looking at some different areas of history behind the dark aspects of the hidden power structure and different methods of psychological warfare currently being used against the entire planet on some level or another. And there are a lot of layers to explore within this. We're going to get to that, but it's been a while since you've been on. Remind the audience all about yourself, your music, your podcast, and what you got going on.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I am the main host of Strange Brew Podcast. We talk about everything and anything strange. We do it with a dark humor. We talk a lot about like dark conspiracies and true crime and the paranormal, all sorts of things, kind of the same stuff you do. I have a couple co-hosts. I have one that's from Ireland. I actually do a horror podcast with him called Class Horrorcast, and we're doing fairly good. We're on the top out of 128 of film and movie podcasts in Ireland, so we're doing good on that side of the world. It's a lot of fun doing that stuff, and it kind of disconnects me from a lot of the real stuff that I talk about on my podcast, a lot of the dark and disturbing things, and we try to make light of it with dark humor. That is the best way, I think. If you're not laughing, you're crying. So especially some of the stuff that we do dive into over at Strange Brew Podcast, it gets pretty dark at times, and I've been going down a rabbit hole, and I take a rope and lasso it around my host, and I kind of drag them behind me as we we go through this journey. And also, if you're interested in hip hop, I've been recording music for a long time. Finally decided to put it out there on Spotify in this last year about, and it's the Raptillion. I've had many different aliases and names, but I've decided to stick with that. I've been recording music since I was like 16, 17. Finally put out some a bunch of my music. Just released a Lost Tapes, which was from like 2010 to 2015, which is pretty wild. And then I just released a new song called World War, which dissects kind of the stuff that I've been looking at when it comes to the idea of history being a lie and what were the wars actually fought for. So if anybody's interested, yeah, go check out the Raptillion. Should be pretty easy to find on all music platforms.
Perfect, man. Great introduction. I'd love to get your perspective on where we're at collectively, where we're headed. It's been a little while since we talked, at least a couple of years, and my outlook on things has shifted in a much more positive direction. Looking back on the past few years, I wasn't sure if we would be heading into some sort of FEMA camp technological slave system. We'd all be forced into some sort of metaverse, Wally world, dystopian reality, but things are looking a little different, at least from my perspective. It seems like there's been a lot of collective victories on the side of humanity, and a lot of the ideologies and agendas that they're attempting to roll out to humanity are being rejected. And this is, to me, a very optimistic sign, but I'd love to get where you're at. You're in a different part of the world, so how do you see things unfolding?
Oh man, Canada is going down a very dark path, in my
Mm,
opinion. Uh, Mass immigration is taking over. It's like a little India here now, and I've always said, right, like that I got nothing against anybody, but in or immigration to some extent, but they have obviously targeted, in my opinion, a lot of the European countries and flooded them with immigrants. They're called the clergy plan. This is something that's been written about for a long time by specifically Zionists. And you kind of dance that line when it comes to talking about this stuff. I know your show is pretty open, but you're not supposed to be talking about this stuff that's happening, right? Immigration is okay if you want to come to a country and work and have like they kind of actually benefit the country. But in Canada has the highest immigration in the world right now, next to like some of the places in Europe that
mm,
women don't want to leave their houses. And
yeah.
so, in my aspect of what's going on physically, it is getting a lot worse when it comes to that. In the States, the border's wide open. This was one of the plans to, if things got bad enough, they would start flooding the Western world with third world
Mm,
immigrants and a lot of people from very dangerous parts of the world with low IQs. And now we see this happening every day. A migrant in Canada kills a Canadian almost, at least assaults them. This is happening more and more often than ever. And I'm positive that now people are starting to
mm,
shift and starting to notice things, because all it is about
mhm,
noticing things. And once enough people notice, then things start to shift. And in my opinion, there's a lot of weakness going on in Canada. There's a lot of weak people
mhm,
that don't want to stand up, and it would take a couple thousand strong men to really put their foot down for things to actually change. And realistically, there's more of us than them. That's why I always try to preach is that power to the people, and no matter where you come from, eventually they're going to come for you. It doesn't matter. Right now, right? The idea is that especially on the left side, there's protected class of people, which is anybody that isn't white or straight, in my opinion. There's a protected class of people. This is happening. It's easy to tell. There's laws that have been passed, and eventually, if the pendulum swings the other way too far, those it's not going to work the same for those people. It's going to go, revenge style, and we don't really want that. We need to like collectivize as humanity, because realistically, I do believe that there is one race, the human race. But if you have different factions of whatever religion it may
mhm.
be, coming to and then fighting, that's not good either. Because I'm not a fan of religion. I got a lot of friends that are Christians, but I see that people are starting to wake up. But I also see a lot of division, and a lot of people are waking up to, I think, who is probably pulling a lot of the puppet strings on the Western world and what's happening.
This is why I love having people from all over the world to give their perspectives on what's happening, because here in the US, we are getting a limited perspective on some of the things that are occurring. And although we may have some victories going on and see a lot of more people waking up, there seems to be a lot of work to do in your part of the world. So all we can do is continue to do
Yeah.
what we're doing now, talking about this stuff, bringing it to awareness, because you know just as well as I do that people that don't want to hear it, they're not going to. If they're not ready to hear some of these things that we're talking about, they're going to reject it, they're going to block it out. Cognitive dissonance takes over, and the situation is worse than before it started. But if they're ready and you're already putting the information out there, all they have to do is come and give it a listen. And I think this is where it all begins, is us continue to do what we do fearlessly. And if people are interested, they will gravitate towards the information. I have seen a lot more people become more interested in some of these things than even a couple of years
See
ago.
people starting to
People are
notice.
starting to
I've
notice,
seen
and it's a
like,
good thing.
yeah, it it's crazy. Even people I know, they're like just like personally know, through family, so that they're like, just watch the hockey games, or they're obsessed with sports, right? Which I think is a way of distracting people. That men will get very compassionate about their team losing, but they won't do anything when their taxes are raised and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But they're starting to notice
Mm.
too, right? And we just did an episode about the great replacement theory, and it got it got restricted on Spotify, at least for reach, like that they wouldn't push it out there as much as other episodes for dangerous content. And if you're not allowed to ask questions, I think that's the most dangerous thing, to control people's speech. Like recently I applied for monetization on YouTube. They rejected it and said that what we talk about is controversial and harmful to viewers. How is asking questions harmful? And that's the whole problem that we're seeing nowadays. They're trying to censor information, and they're trying to essentially control the narrative, even on certain apps, controlling what people can say. And I'm the free speech advocate more than Elon Musk is, because I don't believe him when it comes to that. And the idea that you have to have open dialogue, and if you're not allowed to do that, you're not really free. And this idea, even in Canada, you have all these pro-Palestinian protests blocking infrastructure, doing all this stuff, and I know what's going on there is wrong, and I'm totally against the Zionist. I've been diving down that rabbit hole because my brain starts getting curious, and I think that I'm led towards a certain road for a reason, and to really start looking, and then I become obsessive. Even my co-host he's like, if you've listened to the show long enough, you'll know that Tomcat gets obsessed with certain things for a couple months, and he's like, right now it's the Jews. We just did this episode talking about that, and it like happens where I dive down these rabbit holes. But the thing is, they're like blocking shit. They're like, there's violence, and then meanwhile, during the Freedom Convoy, they beat people in the streets. They arrested people, froze their bank accounts for peacefully protesting. This recently happened in St. John's, in I think it was in Newfoundland, where there was a fisherman protest. It's white guys, and they again brought Stompy the horse out, and it broke somebody's rib. So you can protest as long as it's for their agenda and what they need to cause division. But realistically, they give you protesting and stuff like that to make you and persuade you and make you believe that you're free when you're really not. Because if you couldn't write petitions or protest, then people start to realize that they're actually enslaved more than they understand. And one thing I've been driving home to people is that you are 100% tax cattle for the political class. You are just a number to them. You are a tax slave. And it's now people are starting to notice we're one of the most taxed countries in the world, and it's getting pretty bad.
Yeah.
Man.
Like you said, more people are paying attention. I think it's going to be a gradual snowball effect. And it seems like in Canada, it is taking a little bit longer for a lot of people to catch on, but I'm not going to give up hope on that. I want to go back to some of the quote-unquote dangerous topics you were mentioning earlier. And I want to start with some of the powerful groups that have been attempting to steer humanity for a very long time. And no matter what religion these people attempt to hide behind, at the end of the day, all I've ever seen is entitled, inbred, old white people trying to infiltrate every possible group that can be used to manipulate humanity. And lately, there has been a spotlight on Israel and the Israeli government, which is long overdue. But some researchers are choosing to focus on things that could lead to more dangerous territory. And I think the focus should be on Zionism and the powerful groups and secret societies that are connected to this, and not towards the Jewish people who have no idea what is happening. And there's a lot of other dangerous conversations going on, like maybe Hitler was right, and these far extreme right-wing personalities that have come out lately that are, I believe, just inserted here to cause more and more division. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. And what's happening right now, especially in conspiracy culture, is we're tempted to be pushed as far right or as far left as possible so that we can't see the truth, which lies somewhere in the middle. We're just too far away from it. But what do you think, man? How do you see all this unfolding? What you been looking at?
It's so true, man. So I've been researching. I just developed this shirt, Fuck Communism. So, because I'm very much against the communist agenda. The idea, right, is like, the left, you go too far left, it's communism, where they control everything. You own no property, and that means your children too, and it's in all their writings. It comes from the Bolsheviks. And, but if you go too far right, people say it's Nazism. But what is a Nazi if you analyze it? A National Socialist, right? So nationalism just means a love for your country. That is it. I'm technically a nationalist. If anybody's listening out here, if you root for your team during the Olympics, like if you're Canadian, you root for the Canadians. During the soccer team, if you root for your country, that means you're a nationalist. That means you care about your country and you want your country to win. That's a nationalist identity. So this idea, and then socialism is a form of communism. It opens the door for communism. So technically, in my view, there's communism and then more communism. And this idea that there's a lot of people dissecting stuff that's going on. I've been reading books. I've been reading the Synagogue of Satan. I've been watching Europa: The Last Battle, commentating on it for Patreon. And I will always come at things objectively with an open mind and try to analyze what is going on. But there is a clear history that we see about who is actually controlling the world, at least the Zionist. And if you start reading into the history of this stuff, it comes from supposedly the Khazarian mafia. If that's factual in any way, if it's not just speculation and theory, but there is a lot of evidence to back that up, that they came from where essentially Ukraine is now, and they have no connections to Israel at all. In my opinion, I think they're trying to rebuild Babylon to some extent. And if you start to research stuff that I've been writing out for an episode about the Weimar Republic, which I'm trying to make space from like certain topics because it is a lot of information, and we also don't want to alienate our audience to go a different way just because of some of the stuff that we talk about, right? And I'm just a guy with questions, and I want them answered, and I search for the truth. And if it leads me down this weird rabbit hole where I start questioning more things, and I think that people should hear this stuff, then I'm going to say it. I think that there's certain things that should be said. And if you start to understand what was happening in the Weimar Republic, it's a great reflection of who actually won the war. George S. Patton did say that we defeated the wrong enemy, and then he mysteriously got killed in Germany in some car crash. I think that was the story. So there's a lot of stuff that coincides with this. And now this idea that people are like, the guy with the little mustache was the good guy. And to some extent, he was the only person, as far as I've researched, that arrested a Rothschild. He wanted to push out the Rothschild banking system. There's a lot of numbers that don't add up. The idea of what happened at a certain time, the United States had a concentration camp for the Japanese because the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, probably provoked by Roosevelt, and a lot of stuff was going on with that. And he knew it was coming, I think, and it was to bring them into the war. Who directly the Zionists wanted to bring the United States into the war because Britain was losing against Germany. So then they're like, we need an excuse, problem, reaction, solution. You create the problem, you get the reaction invoked out of the people that you need to go in and find the solution for the problem that you created in the first place, right? So you see all this stuff starting to unfold, and then the United States gets brought into the war, and this idea of that, people were housed in essentially camps and stuff like that because they thought that some violent thing was going to happen. If there is an enemy, you would have to essentially quarantine them and put them in a certain designated spot so where they are. And I'm not saying that the Holocaust didn't happen. I'm not saying that. I'm saying though that there's numbers that don't add up. There's things that don't make sense at all. The rate of cremation that they would have to do is absurd, and actually it couldn't happen. It's impossible. I'm telling you that right now. It's impossible. So I know people died. It's warfare. Right. Tons of people die. Right. But I've been reading into a lot of literature, and they admit that they want to destroy the Goyim. The clergy plan strictly came from people who are Zionists to destroy the European world. There's writings that Germany shall perish, and they wanted to essentially kill all the Germans and eradicate them. And that was way before Hitler got into power. So there's a lot of things that start to make sense and come together of, like, I posted a video on our Instagram, Strange Brew Podcast, about showing newspaper articles. I'm pretty sure that what I've seen is that this guy's grandfather collected newspapers like all the time. I think it was his grandfather collected a bunch of different newspapers, and then you start to see and notice, and who owned all the newspapers specifically within Germany. 78% or 70% of the newspapers were owned by Jewish people. You start to see the 6 million number in like 1913, 1903, way before Hitler ever got to power. So my thing is, like, I'm just asking questions and trying to figure out what the truth is because I want to know the truth. So then you start, all these connections start connecting, and the idea that they came from the Khazarian mafia, they were surrounded by Christian and Muslim nations. They had to choose a religion, so they chose Judaism, and then they kind of added their own spin in it. They're actually not Semite, technically by the definition, it means Arabic. And then for everyone, people that read the Torah or the Old Testament, whatever, I got nothing against you, but I do think that if people, the Talmudist Jews, if you believe in the Talmud and you read that shit, I think it's disgusting. I've read into what they say in that, and you can marry a baby girl at the age of 3. There's a lot of really disturbing shit within the Talmudic writings.
Definitely 100%. And our history is built off of,
written by the victor.
Not only that, but it's built off of propaganda. There were these
both sides.
Both sides, of course. Both sides lead to the same entity. It's, two sides of the same coin. But we look back at these major events: World War I, World War II, the assassination of JFK, Vietnam War. Then you get 9/11.
What did JFK want to do?
Right. Well, you have all these stepping stone events that give these people more power and more control as the event unfolds. And we move forward.
Dancing Israelis on 9/11.
Man. We move forward to the 2020 big COVID operation. Now we're moving forward. It's going to be this World War III turmoil. What could be next? Well, we're in an election year. For the United States, we have the choice of the orange man or the sleeping blunder, which is still, it's all theater, of course. But
it is. Trump is like Zionist bootlicker, man. His children are Jewish.
This infuriates me more than anything. We have people that are coming to great conclusions here in the United States about the system, but they still trust the political system. They still trust the right-left paradigm. But I want to go back to World War II propaganda because this is so important. Growing up, man, I watched those World War II war movies. I was so patriotic.
So did I.
I felt it, man.
Saving Private Ryan is gold.
That's it, man. And they pumped this propaganda into us to really get us in this patriotic state to where it would be impossible to question that our own government would be lying to us about these incredible victories that we've had when it's all been controlled propaganda. And this is the hardest for the boomers and a lot of people who are still very patriotic to even take a look at.
And it's quite wild too, because I remember during COVID, I was talking to my dad, and I was like, "They're doing this on purpose, man. They set this up. This is," and he's like, "Well, why would the government do that?" And I'm like, "Why wouldn't they? It's all about more and more power. Once you have enough money, it doesn't matter. You want power, and you become narcissistic." And I believe that there is some sort of parasitic force that feeds off of these people and controls them. Because even if you come to the ideology that maybe the Nazis were trying to fight for a nationalistic idea and to keep, and the crazy thing is, you can listen to Hitler's speeches now in AI, and a lot of people are starting to question all that stuff. But there's people that believe that they were hijacked, right? The reptilians, when they were contacting the Vril. And I want to dive into this at Strange Brew at some point. There's beliefs that they started infiltrating the movement and who knows, possessing people. But there's definitely a lot of propaganda that was fed to us when it comes to World War II and kind of constructed our idea of what happened. Even in the Band of Brothers, coincidentally created by Steven Spielberg, a Jew that could be involved in the Red Shoe Club or the Red Shoe Society, maybe made Heather Rook out of shoes, the chick from the Poltergeist. That's a deep conspiracy. Yeah, you didn't know that?
I think I might have heard this back in the day, but yeah, that's crazy, man.
Macaulay Culkin talks about this shit, dude. And it's dark, dude. It's very dark. And I'm going to play a clip of supposedly Macaulay Culkin talking about this when we start diving into some of this stuff, maybe about the satanic like Hollywood stuff that I want to get into. But yeah, supposedly he made Heather Rook. They supposedly fucked her to death, which is disgusting. And then, I think it's Rook, her last name. And because she died of these mysterious causes, this like stomach issue or whatever it was. And then supposedly made her out of shoes. But Steven Spielberg made the Band of Brothers, and there was a part where like the Jewish guy is like he's holding a Nazi knife. It's a swastika. He starts crying, and they all console him. And this was supposed to be set way before they liberated the concentration camps. So they're feeding in this idea. They didn't know what was happening. They had no idea. And a lot of those people didn't know until they liberated the concentration camps. And the chimney in Auschwitz was not built till 2 years after the war. So, and the giant hole, they've admitted this they've admitted this numerous times now. So it is kind of funny because then you have Schindler's List. Who was that written by and directed by? Well, he's directed by Steven Spielberg. So you start to look at these names of, Epstein, Mossad Island. It wasn't Epstein's Island. It was Mossad's Island. So it starts to make sense when you start to dissect all of these things and who's putting out this propaganda to sway your opinion on certain things, right? And World War II is such a fascinating thing to me. My grandfather grew up in the Depression, was very for the military, wanted me to join, but even at a young age, I knew that we were fighting wars for rich men, and I remember telling him 2,000 soldiers commit suicide a year, and he didn't want to hear it. So I've always had this ingrained into me to want to learn about history. And then when I started diving down, now I want to know the other side. We've been all conditioned and brainwashed to believe this side of it. I want to know the other side. And once I started down that rabbit hole, it's hard to get out of because then you start to question everything. And that's what I want to push people towards is you don't have to believe either side, but you should at least question it and have an understanding of why things happen, because things just don't happen. There's always a motive. There's a motive for a murder. You can't just have things happen. There's always motive. So why did the Germans believe that they needed to do this? Why did they start that? And then there's a lot of documents, real documents written down that said that Germans never wanted the war. They actually tried to make treaty after treaty after treaty after treaty, and they weren't going for it. Roosevelt and not Roosevelt, Churchill got into power during the war. He was a war criminal. He bombed the living shit out of Germany before they finally retaliated. They kept saying, stop, don't do that, and they killed tons of people. And then finally they retaliated. So you have to understand some of the history. Like when they actually, when they invaded Austria, they were welcomed. The Nazis were welcomed, and they actually liberated them from the Zionist controlled power structure. Same thing with Poland. There's a lot of things that people don't know about what happened with Poland and how the Polish were influenced to kill German kids, and it goes really deep and it's really disturbing. But once you start to analyze it, war is war, and there was death on both sides, and we're not being told the truth about why things happen, why this happened or that happened.
Yeah, but
right?
if you
Churchill's
look at
not
it,
this
you're
great guy.
a anti-Semite, or you're a conspiracy theorist, or you're a domestic terrorist, something like that. So those are the terms that have been weaponized to try and deter people from even looking at some of this stuff. Now, I know you wanted to get
100%,
into some of what's occurring in Hollywood, some of the occult satanic aspects, and we know from doing this long enough that the CIA and Hollywood has had the relationship since the beginning of Hollywood, and have been not only sharing secrets for the purpose of propaganda and global mind control, but attempting to steer humanity with culture creation. And this has been going on from the beginning as well. And there's many more layers to this. But talk about what you've been looking into.
So especially with, it's funny because it seems like the Weimar Republic was definitely a kind of test ground for the hippie culture. And I was always I would love to be a hippie, man. I remember I was tripping balls on mushrooms watching Freebird play, because now they have it all in HD at Woodstock. And then I remember saying to my wife, man, I'd love to be there. And she's like, maybe you were there. Maybe you died. Died there, overdose. Who knows, right? Or just tripping balls. And, and I like that idea, but it seems very much that, that communism kind of took over, and some of the stuff that the Bolsheviks were kind of influencing. And then it came into this forefront of the Beatles could have been essentially a CIA Illuminati creation. There's a lot of Illuminati hand symbols that they give out constantly throughout their music. There's that cover where me and Billy, my co-host, brought up where there's a bunch of baby parts everywhere on the cover, and it's just very, and meat. They have meat, and it's supposed to be talking about the Vietnam War, but I'm there's something more layers to that. They were very close with Jimmy Savile. We did a 4.5 hour episode about that guy. After the third hour, I was getting into how he's a magician, and both the co-hosts at the time were like, "It's a little far fetched." I'm like, "No, no, he was a wizard. A cigar was a wand." Like just making jokes because it goes like really deep, right? And then the idea that the Beatles influence this whole free love movement, right? And to like, you don't need the nuclear family, and then it starts to go back to how the CIA is probably controlled by Mossad. And I want to make the point across, right, that like fundamental ideologies of like, okay, communism, right? If you start to look into it and have the idea of what's going on, they created feminism to destroy the nuclear family. They want to, so then once you destroy the nuclear family and you have the mother no longer teach the child while the father is doing work or whatever it may be, then the state controls the kid and is able to brainwash them and manipulate them. So you erase, and this is all in the writings. Some of the top people in the feminist movement were all Jewish, and as much as it stood for yes equality, I think that it's necessary to see that there is the that men and women should be equal to some extent. You know what I mean? And that there is a fundamental difference, and that you need feminine energy and masculine energy to make this world. And then transgenderism, right? Which is very open in Hollywood. So many celebrities have transgender kids. That's like almost mathematically impossible. So, and then you start looking at it is you all like Kate. There's who's Katy Perry. There's a bunch of them. I think it's Katy Perry, but there's a bunch of them that do, and it's quite bizarre. Jamie Lee Curtis, after she had the Podesta picture behind her in on Instagram, and she had it taken down. And then so you look at that, and when the first transgender clinic was made by Dr. Hirschfeld in the Weimar Republic, when he was dominated by Jewish people, and then you start to look at all this stuff, and then it all relates back to this Bolshevik idea, and then you think that CIA, controlled by them, influence society, and then they start putting in their symbolism, and at the heart of it, I do believe that a lot of the Talmudists Jews pray towards one of the Anunnaki gods, or Baal, which ends up being Baal in the end, or like Moloch in some of these, and you see the symbolism everywhere, man.
Yeah.
There's layers to this shit. I've been reading a lot.
There's a lot of layers. What do you think's happening with the high-level sacrifices being really exposed as the pedophiles and the sexual degenerates that they are?
We just did P. Diddy, like a whole deep dive about P. Diddy and Nickelodeon, bro. It's like crazy because when you start to look at that stuff and analyze it and the connections and this kind of like homo magic that they do, like this Aleister Crowley, you know what I mean? Where it's like it's against God. And there's a lot of people like Mark Dice has talked about this for a long time, where that they're using this because it's a smite against God and all that stuff, and they're doing these ritualistic practices, and you can invoke certain entities while you're under having sex and all sorts of shit. Like
butthole portal
is possible. Yes, literally. So, and you start to look at this. If I wanted to talk about this when we got into the satanic Hollywood thing, is there, look at the celebrities and how many of their firstborn child died. It is like absurd. You got like there's Dr. Dre, there's a bunch of them that their firstborn son specifically, but usually their firstborn child died mysteriously in a weird way, and it's sacrificing, or they sacrifice a family member, and that's the idea where it's like, how are you going to show us? You have to show us that you're able to go on this journey. You have all these celebrities, even people like Snooki from Jersey Shore, saying that she like sold her soul to the devil. And there's nothing. If you go through all these pictures, so much Illuminati imagery, the Eye of Horus, which I think connects back to like Babylonian gods and even deeper stuff that I think people don't understand. But they're definitely sacrificing, and I feel like it's more. There's two things going on, right? There's the idea of blackmail, like what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. He was this financier that was financing no one, realistically, if you look at his money and what was happening. Ghislaine Maxwell was probably the main component and controller of that. Her father mysteriously died in a boat, also very much connected to Mossad. And so you're enforcing this perversion within society, specifically within the pop culture and the music, and Beyonce, all sorts of people, Rihanna, and they can influence people, Taylor Swift, young girls to like, there's so many layers to this, to influence them to like hate men, all sorts of things, to kind of break apart what makes humanity like human is a father, a mother, the hierarchy of a family, and there's definitely some shady stuff going on. I think P. Diddy was a fall guy. I think it goes deeper than that, and I think they know that they're house of cards is starting to crumble. So they're starting to like throw pieces out there to kind of move people in a different direction. And the P. Diddy shit goes like deep, man. He like supposedly fucked Meek Mills, and there's like a video of the security guard, and he's like by the door, like taping it, and it's like disturbing, man. And then there's like video right after supposedly this happened, and he's like, "You did good work, man. You did good work." It's just like, oh god, dude.
So you mentioned the Red Shoe Club earlier, and I wonder at times if some of these stories are exaggerated in any way to get the conspiracy community looked at as tinfoil hat wearing crazy people. We never get any real reliable proof of anything, and no one ever answers to any of these crimes that we ever hear about. But when we look at things like the Red Shoe Club and the really dark, disturbing child trafficking and sacrifice possibilities, how deep do you think that can go?
See, I think that, truth is stranger than fiction. So even the things that we think that we know, it probably goes far darker. And I do believe there's a connection to adrenochrome. And if it really is these like parasitic entities, reptilians, whatever they may be, according to I'm reading Children of the Matrix, it's tough to get through. I love David Icke, but his books and the way they're written, it's a lot of stuff within like this massive book. And and this idea is supposed to be to stay in this reality, right? They need the adrenochrome. It allows them to physically stay here in these bloodline families. So I think that plays some part of it. And I'm the type of person, I've seen weird stuff in my life. I've seen crazy things. I've seen proof of these entities, in my opinion, with my shadow people experience. So I do think that there's a possibility that has something to do with it. I do think, like, look how many children go missing a year, man. It's not this like coincidental thing. 84 children went missing 84,000 children went missing at the border. Like, that's crazy. And they admitted this. That's a lot of kids, man. Even that alone on the surface of what they have admitted of like essentially like immigrant children or whatever from the whatever third world and how they end up here and all this shit. And there's a lot of coincidental things. And if they are really having these weird parties where they get him in precarious positions, and that's the whole thing with Jeffrey Epstein. I think it goes way deeper than that. But like, oh yeah, this chick, she's like 18, like, like have fun, whatever. And you find out she's 15 and then they get you. So imagine things that go deeper in the levels of where this goes and what Hillary Clinton's involved with in like it's the removing of the face of a children with the Wiener laptop. And that is like, if people acknowledge that, then they have to acknowledge that their entire life is a lie, that everything that they know of is much more nefarious and scary than they will ever understand, that there is truly, truly evil in this world that has been taking over the planet and manipulating everything within our society. There's really good people out there, and if there's really good people, there's really bad people. So if people start to acknowledge that there is things like Pizzagate, which a lot of people were like, and that's debunked. The guy that debunked it got caught with child porn.
Right.
So there So like realistically, you have to start looking at this stuff and like frazzle drip and all these weird like sayings that they have and why they scrub like Hillary Clinton's laptop. And there's deeper connections to like even the Trudeau family. And it's like, it's pretty disturbing. I do think that it goes a lot deeper than most people think. And I think that the idea of the Red Shoe Club is something that could happen. They wear these red shoes because it blends in with the blood, so it's dripping on their shoes, and it's all symbolism, right? And if you've looked into a lot of Bohemian Grove stuff, like that happened. Yeah. Alex Jones caught that on camera. They cremated their cares. They're burning away all their cares about the horrible things they've done in the past year. That's a real thing, even if it's just an effigy, which I believe that it's probably real in some extent. These people are like evil. And if you start to, I'm going to read this book when I'm at the college called 1666 Redemption Through Sin. This guy does great stuff on YouTube. He's like an anthropologist kind of dude, and he's fascinating because he dissects the Zionist stuff, and they believe in redemption through sin. And if you start to study the Talmud as Jews, they'll like the one practice K-Prat or whatever it's called. They will supposedly like do a ritual where they put all their sins into a chicken, and they're like projecting all their sins into a chicken. Then they fucking kill the chicken and they eat it, and it's like that's the one of the thing that they actually do, and that is fucking weird, man.
Yeah, that, I mean, really, you can look at a lot of these religious practices. I mean, in Christianity, all you got to go do is sit in a booth and tell some dude about your sins and then eat the body and blood of Christ and you're good. So, but that seems that it can go into some pretty dark territories, especially when you look at the reasons behind some of these, why some of these groups participate in these things. Now,
that's a cannibalistic act. That's a symbolism of cannibalism for all the Christians out there, stuff like that. That comes specifically from the Vatican. My buddy that's a Christian, they don't do that shit. So it is a symbolism, and you know, David I talks about the reptilian stuff that goes on with that, but there's definitely that's definitely a weird thing,
well, hey,
man. And the energy you're putting out there when you're, you know.
well, no, we're in the weird waters, so we're gonna go deep, man. We're gonna wade deep into these waters and see how far we can go. Well, we're talking about hijacked reality. In my perspective, there are layers of reality, and there are aspects that have 100% been hijacked by very nefarious individuals and groups that want to hold on to power and attempt to steer humanity in certain ways. This is done through religion and certain power structures and the isms you were talking about earlier, Zionism, communism, and it's all held together by our education and political systems, and this forms the matrix reality. And I look at the human beings that are at the top, at least the ones that we can identify and we know their names. And it's hard enough to think, well, are these guys really human? Because I can't imagine myself participating in some of the activities that I hear these guys do. But we have to look at it as we don't have proof otherwise. So we'll go with, yes, these guys are human. But you also have the ritualistic aspects that they participate in. Many of these groups believe in the practices that they are participating in, and there are some very dark aspects behind it. So the question is, are there intelligences that they are answering to, or at least believe that they're answering to, that could be orchestrating a lot of the direction that we're headed?
Yeah, and I do definitely think that there is people controlled, and a lot of it is like I don't know. I think there's people that like say Trudeau or something like that, even Biden or whatever. They don't really know what's like going on. They've been involved in some really shady shit, but they actually don't know how far this really goes. But there's the idea. I did a song called "Fuck Trudeau." It actually got me a lot of attention. You know, a lot of people did like it, and I talked about sacrificing your brother for ritualistic murder. I guess we all have to pay the price. You sadistic pervert. So, and there's just a weird thing of like all this sacrifice, and his mom and like him laughed about his brother getting involved with this weird accident on a ski hill, and he's like, well, he shouldn't have been doing that. And it's just like, it's absurd. They're like disconnecting an unempathetic view of what happened to a family member, especially a son and a brother. And so you start to see this, and there's definitely some sort of parasitic force. They're feeding off of our energy, whether they be reptilians or they be some sort of Anunnaki kind of entities that have existed for eons and are trying to control this reality. And according to, we just did an episode about the Anunnaki. I kind of wanted to start diving into some of that stuff. I don't know much about that, right? And you've had Billy Carson on the show. I found him fascinating, and he's blown up recently. So I was like, I want to cover my bases. and this idea of that maybe it comes from all of that they created us and smited God to some extent, the one true creator maybe, and knew they would be punished, and we were created out of this weird experiment, and maybe that's who's like feeding off of us, because there's definitely, like, I've felt it on mushrooms. I've always tried to test myself, like I did it to 4 grams of mushrooms. I'm like closing my eyes, seeing 1,000 eyes and stuff like that. DMT is supposed to do this, but mushrooms do this to me. And then I'm looking through the fractals, and I'm like seeing like almost demonic faces, and I'm telling them that you have no power over me. And it's almost like I'm seeing through this reality of what things are existing beyond this. A lot of these people are just puppets, and then that feeds into that narcissistic reality. Everybody knows what it's like to feed into some of those sexual urges, maybe, and the stuff that pleasures us in a lot of ways. I've done it. Like, I'm drinking a scotch and soda. I try to keep alcohol at bay all the time, but we feed into some of these things to make ourselves feel better, or bury things that are in our heads. That's why mushrooms kind of opens up that. But these people are that have no empathy and don't know what it's like to feel empathy. They're definitely being controlled by some sort of force, in my opinion. It's almost impossible to think that like these people have some good in them. Like I think that they're just put there on purpose. The scariest thing would be is that like that they're not real as we think they are. You know what I mean? That they're like not, they're just a meat suit of puppeting some sort of being puppeted by some sort of creature, which is the craziest thing. Because even diving into the reptilian stuff, Juan from the One-on-One podcast, we covered a kind of extensive talk about it, and the idea that they can reincarnate and they can purposely, like at will.
That's what I was just going to bring up, is the possibility that these very powerful families and groups have this secretive occult knowledge of how to reincarnate back into these rich and powerful groups or into a certain bloodline and come back into this world with a certain amount of power. The main reason they do this is because they don't have a connection to source energy anymore. They've spent all their karma being pieces of shit in this reality. So all they can do is reincarnate back here and have power on this earth. That's why they have no interest in any other spiritual pursuits or anything that's positive. They stick to the material because they want to be in controllers of the material, really.
That's interesting, because that's kind of what we were pointing at. Because like I've talked with the reptilians numerous times. It's always something that's fascinated me since I was like a young kid. My co-host can vouch for this. He's like, I worked with him. He's like a 16-year-old dishwasher. I'm like 18 or 19. This is how come we formed their friendship. But I'm like, the fucking reptilians are controlling the world, man. Like even when I was really young, dude. So and it's because David Icke, man. I was fucking 17 watching his like 3-hour-long videos, and it kind of just opened up my mind using the Ouija board. But it is an interesting take to think that is possible, because when we talked about it, and I was like, I need new information, so I'm going to go look down a rabbit hole, and it kind of talked about that idea that they're obsessed with the physical realms and the either sexual gratification or negative energy gratification or whatever it might be, to consume energy that way. They've become obsessed with it, so they can't really leave this physical reality, and that's, who knows, maybe that's why they've turned into some sort of serpent creature, is because it's reflecting who they really are, right? The Alex Collier talks about this stuff too, is if that's the case, and that's just such an interesting thing to think about. Are they just, they're obsessed with it, so they're using our energy, and they are obsessed with the physical world and the pleasures they get from here, so they've figured out a way to hijack this reality. And there's probably things outside of our reality all the time that are corresponding with us that we have no clear-cut idea of where they are, who they are, what they're doing. And as the older I get, the times I think about when I was using the Ouija board, I was probably talking to something that was very much alive and not some sort of dead person walking around the planet in purgatory, which could happen to some extent. I think if people or they die instantly, they might sit in this reality for a bit and not even know they're dead, because I've heard this from psychics. But it is a weird thing to try to puzzle over and figure out what the true answer is.
It's possible that there's this entire ecosystem beyond our perception, not only of different intelligences, lower, high vibrational, but maybe even our thought forms and this egregore energy that we put out there that may take on a life of its own because it's such a powerful or imaginative thought. If we are indeed creators in this reality and we're projecting things, and based on our imagination and what we put out there, that is how our reality unfolds, who's to say that in a way we couldn't create some of the entities and beings that we interact with on a subconscious or astral level, right?
See, and that's a crazy thought too. I like the idea of like Slenderman. Could we actually manifest him into real life like that? Eventually, my buddy, we always joke he was Slenderman for the Halloween special, and he's a skinny, tall dude, right? So we always called him the Slenderman, and we were eventually going to cover it. But there's that chick that they lured that kid out and murdered him, and thinking that Slenderman told them to do it, and it's like maybe they created that inside their own minds of that it was a real thing. And then do we create some of these creatures that we know of today in folklore, in cryptozoology? And it is fascinating because we could be creating these things, these negative energies. And if you do have a somebody puppeting this reality and they're influencing us in a big way in this negative world, like there's literally people chopping off their dicks and shit because they think that they're a different gender, and it's going to destroy almost their entire lives and have numerous problems. So you can get people to do that here. Like, you know how much psychic energy you're probably like drawing out of some of those people that are like have gone crazy and don't even know what reality is, and they're dressing up like furries, and I'm not disparaging that, but you know what I mean? And then so you're projecting that energy out there, and what are you creating when that's happening? And then they're able to suck off this energy from everybody in this negative force. And I've got I wouldn't say hate in me, but anger in me about some of the stuff that's going on. And I think that, sometimes it can be used as a tool. Anger can be used as a tool. We should, but realistically, like this hate speech thing, we should hate evil. That's a fact. We should hate what evil and wrong things that are happening. We should hate people who abuse children. This idea that we're supposed to love everybody and accept everybody, I think, is wrong. And now we see where we could be creating this negative reality that we exist in, and this is what they've always wanted: is to consume our energy, make this weird. Like we're like 100% slaves to this energy, and everyone feeds into it, and the internet almost made it worse, but then woke people up at the same time. So it's kind of like the worst thing they could have given us was the internet, because it allowed people to access information, do shows like this. And I think that it was their downfall.
Well, while we're
in a lot of
on the
ways.
topic of technology, there's some interesting things that are happening in the interwebs and social media lands, especially with algorithms and artificial intelligence and the echo chambers that a lot of conspiracy culture is now caught up in. It's more and more difficult to get new people to understand these ideas because of the algorithms from their social media platforms, keeping them in this echo chamber, not showing them anything that they're not interested in or won't give them that dopamine hit. So it's difficult to get a wider audience nowadays, and they've just been flooding the internet with the craziest shit ever and trying to get people to look into things that don't serve humanity, don't serve themselves, and further away from the truth and further away from each other. So it's a very dangerous territory that we've entered in with social media and technology in general. And I think now's the time, if we could, to get our hands on this and have people that are like-minded become developers and working with AI and try and steer this technology in the right direction, because it's not going anywhere. There's no way that we'll ever be able to get rid of technology. We just have to do our own infiltration and take it back over. But where do we start with that? I have no idea. But what do you think about those aspects?
And that's interesting too, because this idea that, like, people think, oh, they're gonna wipe out the internet, they're gonna do this. Like, I've tried to save up all my episodes on it's just like a external the hard drive just in case. Who knows, right? And I don't know, like, part of me thinks like a lot of people are scared of that it takes one like sonic boom or some sort of energy weapon, and then the grid's gone. But I'm like, would they really want that? Because then
No.
people start putting down their
Yeah.
phones and their computers.
That's
and
the
they
end
start
of
to
their
look
game,
around
man.
and be
That's
like,
the end of their game.
yeah. Oh, and then Project Bluebeam will come into play. They'll be like, the fucking fake alien invasion is here with all our holographic technology. And that's the craziest thing is like, how far does AI go realistically, right? And how does, so if we've developing AI now and it becomes this sentient being, is it already in the future and able to manipulate us in the future into the past because it's so intelligent that it can travel through the internet airwaves, because that's technically its own dimension, and able to like influence us now from the future when it's became a sentient, right? So, and like the idea of like the Terminator type movie, which was what set in like around this time era. So it is interesting that definitely need to push things towards a certain direction. I'm a fan of this guy named Jeremy McKenzie. He's part of a group called Diagolon. It's a joke. They're the people that got the Emergency Act evoked in Canada for a right-wing nationalist group when they were just people that were noticing things. Very outspoken man that was a veteran and saw he was lied to about the Iraq War, and then he went to Afghanistan, all this stuff, right? So one of their slogans is "Find others," and so I think it is I think that people, you are either awake now after COVID, or it's very hard to show people the truth, because there's that the KGB, and the communists figured out how to do this, it would take a couple months of bombarding people with certain information to make them believe in it, and if you showed them the objective truth of what was actually going on, to the contrary of what they've been brainwashed with, they will not accept it. So we've seen this now recently where people just don't want to hear it. They plug their ears, they shut their eyes. They don't want to look at the truth of what's going on. And they're playing people off from each other. It's quite clear all the time. This Ukraine, Russia thing, there's people that love Russia and think they're the good guys. And realistically, Putin, who knows, may be against some of the stuff that's going on, but he definitely, I think, is still part of the Zionist agenda. I think that he also he sold out. So everyone wants this savior complex thing, and I hate that. Nobody's coming to save us. We are our own savior. And, instead of looking for, in Canada, everyone wants like this guy, Pierre Poilievre to win. But meanwhile, he's like, we need more immigration. We need more of this. And then now he's like, no, we're going to stop immigration. So how do you trust these people that keep going backwards and saying one thing or another? Same with Trump. He says one thing and then another. Everyone wants him to be some sort of savior. If you want to know who the savior is, everyone needs to go look in the mirror, because it's you. If you have enough people that collectivize and come together and start realizing that, hey, we can change things together on our with ourselves. Like a couple thousand strong people can change the whole world. Look what happened during the Freedom Convoy. People were just having fun dancing downtown Ottawa in hot tubs and shit, and that changed things and influenced the world. So imagine if people actually collectivized and realized there's more of us than them. There's no military, police force, or government entities that could stop that, and they're not going to bomb us all into oblivion, because then guess what? Their game is over. They have no more. We've all ascended technically to another level of reality, and they have no worker slaves anymore.
100%.
And the scariest thing to me is always are we just slaves in reincarnation, just constantly coming back?
I consider that, and I've moved past that based on my own experiences and where I'm at in my life. And I think there is a greater force guiding humanity. I think it's our collective consciousness. I think it's source. I think we're done with this system collectively, and it's just taking more time for some to join in, more time for some to get the message, but it's coming through. There's this 100th monkey effect that is going across the planet right now.
Yeah, that's a great,
But
that's great.
the simple answer, for me at least, is personal accountability. Take care of your own life. Stop participating with the things that don't serve yourself and don't serve humanity, and quit paying attention to the things that divert your attention from taking care of shit in your life that is more important than this matrix reality. It's all about taking personal accountability. At one point, we were so immersed collectively in the matrix, we had no idea what was happening. Before 2020, we were still going out and voting and arguing daily on over red or blue. We're eating the toxic GMO foods and the poisons that they spray in the air. We're breathing it in. We're going and paying for Hollywood movies. And it wasn't until a few years ago that we got this huge collective slap in the face and started to realize maybe we shouldn't be participating with this corrupt system as much. So I have hope that that's going to continue and the personal accountability will continue. But what do you think?
Do you think I got a question for you? I'll go on a little tangent, but do you think that there is some sort of benevolent force that could be pushing humanity towards
A
something?
billion percent.
Because
Yes.
like you think of it, because if there is evil and there's evil entities and beings that exist, there has to be good. And whether that be the Palladians or whatever, whoever it might be, just like these entities that you would think, I want to cover this at some point because we always cover the dark entities, and I've yet to, like, we've done the reptilians, the greys, all that stuff. The Palladians, if they are real, I know people that like send me stuff about like, check this out. And it's like this AI, like, we're coming to save you. And I'm like, I don't know about that, but I do believe that there is a good possibility that if you're ascended to such a high level that all you do is radiate love, like say if Jesus existed the way we think he did, someone who was selfless, and everyone needs to look for that in themselves. Mushrooms can do that for you. They'll show you that. But you do believe that there is some sort of force kind of maybe starting to push us, because I feel like I can feel it.
100%. And not only have I seen it in people that I never thought I would have seen, just this spark, but not only...
It's hard to say that now because I was vaccinated.
Well, they still have those folks out there. But for me, it's my personal experiences with what I've seen for myself. I did an episode recently that actually sparked a whole new show, and it was about a very profound plant medicine experience where I was shown God, source, and downloaded a great amount of information for me personally.
What'd you take? Shroomies? Yes. How much did you take?
Probably about 5 grams or so.
Okay, yeah, that's a good.
Yeah. Just from the information I received through that experience and afterwards, I just have a knowing that there is a greater benevolent force at play, and it's leading humanity and speaking to us each in our own different ways, whether it's through plant medicines or meditation or in our dreams. People are starting to get this transmission, I call it, that's coming through. And I think it's going to continue to get stronger and stronger. And this is just my personal thing, but I think we are going to be headed in the right direction collectively, and we'll start to see it more.
I see that too, and realistically, I do agree with you taking responsibility for your own life. Like, I've been personally on this journey. You know, I gained a lot of weight over the years of just drinking alcohol and being a chef and drinking beer after the bar. You know, I work in a metal shop. I'm a pretty strong dude or whatever, but I've been focused on working out and then reading and trying to do different things to motivate myself. We built the garden recently. You know, our jalapenos are doing great, and we're like starting to cultivate some of that stuff. I would love chickens at some point, you know, but the wife's like, you got to take care of a garden and a kid and a dog, and then we'll talk about the chickens, because then you're feeding yourself, right? So I've really went down this path of wanting to better myself and become the best version of myself. And I'm very angry about the state of the world, especially what's happening to our country. And then obviously people are going to be starting to awaken to what's going on. And I can see that. And I do think you're right. It's about taking personal responsibility. A lot of people don't want to. They want to blame everybody else for their problems. Oh, it's this, it's that. Oh, it's, you know, like I've had black friends growing up my entire life, or the indigenous. A lot of them like to blame the past. Because my ancestors were enslaved or this or that. And it's just like, you need to take responsibility of what you're doing in your own life. You can't expect handouts everywhere you go. You got to work hard. And do I think that we are tax cattle for the government? For 100%. A lot of people are being beaten down, pushed down, kicked down constantly, nonstop, all the time. And if people start, we're all collectively in this together. But but there's definitely an attack on like the Europeans and white people in general of we're the enemy, and then it causes more and more division for everybody else and everyone else's victimhood, and that's what you see. And there's definitely a construct that's being played out within that of getting us to constantly be divided. Divide and conquer is one of the oldest tricks in the book, and they've been at it nonstop, especially recently. But you start to see people slowly start to understand what is actually happening, and that's even the stuff about, apocalypse can also mean like a revealing, so to speak. Yeah. So that's why I find it interesting where people are like, well, why are they allowing us to see some of the stuff to do with the Zionist and the Talmudist Jews and all that stuff? And I'm like, and they're not allowing anything. I think this is a natural progression of people starting to wake up and pay attention and look at things. And there's information out there that's been hidden, and you can find it, in archives in the way back machine. There's certain things you can find, and they can't erase everything. They're going to try, but there's people that still have physical copies of books that we're not supposed to be reading and share, right? So
yeah, people don't give the power of human consciousness enough credit, and I think it's becoming more powerful by the day, the collective consciousness and where we're headed. So I dig it, man. Tomcat, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man, we got into a bunch of shit. Dude. I always love coming on your show. You have a great show. I've listened to a couple of your episodes recently. There's one about hip hop that I was listening to. Like you do some cool, different stuff. You have a lot of different guests. It's always interesting, and I always feel it's very natural to speak with you. I think we think very much the same. If I ever one day get down to the States, I would love to like come hang out and work with you on something or do something fun.
Yeah, man.
Because I think we're very much, and this is what I mean, like, find others. We're all out there. There's a lot of people out there, and we got to find each other, because this is what's going to really change the world, this collective.
That's it. We're going to have to make our own breakaway civilizations. All right, Tomcat, this was great. We're going to do it again very soon in the future. It was too long before.
Yeah.
And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening, and we will talk again tomorrow. And go check out Strange Brew Podcast. I'll have his links in the description.